Africa. And this was done by the United Nations United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. We had a speaker from UNCTAD here today, and UNEP, which is actually based here in Nairobi. What they found when they reviewed 114 organic or near organic projects, agroecological projects, in 24 African countries. They looked at 2 million hectares, 1.9 million farmers, that the average crop yield was 116% for all of Africa. Here in East Africa, 128%. Now, I just want to explain a few things about this. This is starting from a baseline of what we call traditional systems, or as Bo talked about, organic by neglect. But when we go from that to good organic management, organic by design, we can talk about 100% increases. Why is this relevant? Well, the majority of food insecure people live in the developing world. Honestly, it doesn't matter how much we increase the yields in the USA or Australia or other countries that do broad acre, it makes no difference to these people. Where we have to increase the yields are in the developing countries. In other words, if we want to get food security in Africa, we increase yields in Africa. And we can do it, and that's what I want to talk about and actually show you how to do it. The other thing I want to say too, and this is really critical, the report notes that since the 1960s, when what we now call chemical intensive industrial agriculture was first introduced into Africa, there is 10% less food per person in Africa now than 50 years ago. Now, I would argue that that experiment, after 50 years, has failed. Business as usual is a failure, and trying to push it, it's really making a dead cat bounce. We need, as Hans has said, we need system transformation if we're going to feed this world. Let's look at it. And where I want to start with is the fundamentals of system transformation. Soil health. It starts in the soil. The soil is the greatest area of biodiversity in this planet. All agriculture starts in the soil. We have to get it right. Most pests and diseases are actually opportunistic. They attack plants that are stressed or sick. We know that if we can correctly balance soils, we get minimal diseases, minimal pests. What we know is these soils are rich in organic matter, beneficial organisms, nutrients, and have a good structure. We also know that they are the answer to so many weeds. Now, in Africa, there's two major weeds here, striga or striga, parasitic weed, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Another one is imperator grass, which is known as cut grass, blady grass. There's lots of different names. They are major weeds. You know what they are? They are indicators of poor soil. We have enough evidence now. We correct the soil, they just disappear. We don't need herbicides. We need good soil management. And I want to give you examples here in Africa. This is Ethiopia. And this is part of the Tigray project. And here you can see wheat. It's the same strain of wheat. It's grown on the same soil. There's nothing separating them. The difference is one was treated with compost, the other with good chemical fertilizers. The one that is treated with chemical fertilizers has ended up getting stripe rust. Needs to be sprayed with fungicide. So if you look at that one, the only reason they get a crop now is that they have to spray with fungicides. And I want to get this across because this is what has happened to agriculture. With the introduction of chemical fertilizers, we now need toxic chemicals to protect the plants to get yields. Without them, yields crash. The composted wheat required no fungicides, and have a look, it got 6.5 tonnes a hectare as against the 1.6 tonnes of the chemically fertilised wheat. This is my own farm. I'm a farmer. I've been farming for more than, close to 50 years. An organic farmer, agroecological farmer. And one of my crops are papaya, and we get a bug that is a severe pest, and all the conventional industrial farmers fought for years to keep endosulfan, one of the last of the DDT family, a chemical that causes horrendous birth defects in children. They said, oh, without it we can't grow. I want you to look at it. You can see the damage lower down. You look up and you can see the papayas forming. Now, what I did there is fix up the soil health. No sprays, no poisons, and dealt with one of the worst pests. Let's now, because I've only got a short time, I can't go into a lot of detail, but I just wanted to get across. If you get the soil health right, trust me, that's 95% of your problem solved. The other 5% we can start looking at agroecology. And I want to introduce a word called functional biodiversity. This is where we bring in biodiversity in the system that gives us ecosystem services. In this case, I want to talk about pest control, controlling pests. What we know is that many of our beneficial insects, that are the natural enemies of our pests, need a range of plant hosts. And many of them actually have to have nectar and pollen. A lot of them actually, it's their adult stages are actually they're vegans. They live on pollen and nectar, or they need it actually to become sexually reproduce. But it's their larval stage that is the predator. And you can see here what happens is with these beneficial insects, they're like bees, they feed on nectar and pollen, and then you can see how they lay their eggs in or on pests like caterpillars, and then the larvae feed on the pests and kill them. If you don't have flowers in the system, if you do what most industrial systems are, you've sprayed everything out with Roundup, you've nuked everything apart from your cash crop, you have nothing there for these beneficial insects. Anyway, they're probably being killed by the pesticides you've sprayed anyway. But if one goes in and it doesn't get killed by pesticides, it'll die of starvation because it doesn't have the nectar. So when I learnt that, I redesigned my system. As an organic farmer, I used to use organic sprays. But then when I started to learn from various universities, I started to redesign my own farm. This is my own farm. And you can see flowers under my trees. My neighbours wonder why I keep all these weeds. I actually think it looks very nice, having flowers under my trees. I like it. And they provide nectar, pollen, mating sites, refuges, and another thing they do, they suppress weeds. When we talk about functional biodiversity, I'm getting multiple functions. This is research that I learnt from in the United States. Went out and various professors and people took me out to different farms and showed me different models where people are planting the host plants as barriers or around their farms. Another thing you can do is strip mowing. Instead of turning your place into a neat park and garden, is actually leaving lots of flowering plants as refuges. By doing that, you dramatically increase the amount of beneficials in your system. So this is my orchard again. And you can see I'm leaving tall areas with multiple flowering plants. And they are refuges. And it's a bit like high-rises. The higher you make multi-storey buildings, the more people you can keep in it. It's the same with these. So I don't mow my place in one go. I do it in stages. I always leave a strip. So it's always a refuge for beneficials. Later on I'll mow that, but another area has grown up. This is Myanmar, and you see here a simple way is to plant something like sunflowers as a border. They attract the pests, and what happens is the beneficials are in there and eat them before they get through to devour the crop. This is here in Kenya. And I was taken out had a wonderful day thanks to COAM, taken out to organic farmers many years ago when I first became iPhone president. Never forget the day and never forget my colleagues, fellow farmers here. And these borders here have the potential, if properly managed, to give multiple ecosystem services. They provide habitat for birds, frogs, beneficial insects. They act as barriers, like you saw with the sunflowers, windbreaks, with the right species of stock food, legumes, and sustainably harvested, we can use for compost and biogas. The similar thing in Myanmar. And when we looked at this, we also found botanical insecticides in it. But with a little bit of redesigning, these sort of neglected areas suddenly can become highly functional. The word we actually use is eco-function intensification, where we now bring biodiversity into our system to increase the ecosystem services, the functions we get. Now, this is my own farm. And I took this picture because I wanted to illustrate exactly how this works. Now, the reason I took that, I wanted to show the sunlight. This is a legume. Now, I'm regarded as the messiest farmer because I don't use Roundup and I'll let all these big weeds go up my trees. You know, how can I let my place go to rack and ruin like this? Let's start looking at it from an ecological and scientific point of view. What I'm doing now is maximizing solar capture of my farm. What are we doing when we're farming? We're capturing solar energy and using photosynthesis to provide products, fruit, nuts, grains, or feed for animals, for milk, cheese, meat. But it all comes from photosynthesis. What we want to do is capture every drop of it, every photon. This is photosynthesis that my fruit tree isn't using. I'm using that now to power my ecosystem services, so using solar energy. This is a crop called rambutans. I just want to say I used to export all around the world, and particularly to Japan. And Japanese are the fussiest consumers you'll ever deal with. You have to have absolutely perfect fruit. I produced pretty well absolutely perfect fruit without using a pesticide through the system. So this is a vine that fixes nitrogen. I don't need any nitrogen fertilizer. It's doing it with the biology, because don't forget the air is 78% nitrogen. It is putting soil carbon in, which is really important to feed the biology, and nutrients. I haven't got time to explain but the best way to improve the nutrients in your soils are to grow crops. Roots put nutrients in. Don't remove if you do it properly. I've got green manure, stock feed. I'm a great believer in integrating stock animals at the moment. I've got cattle, but in the past when the trees are smaller, I had geese. The flowers, and you can't really see them here, but there's flowers all through here of different species, attract the beneficial insects. I get my pest control for free. Living mulch. This idea, the weeds can compete with water, actually it's the other way around. They shade. We actually know there's a thing called the cloud stripping effect. Plants will strip water at night time that's in the atmosphere and add it to the soil. They increase the moisture. They shade the soil so it's cooler, the roots grow. I live in lowland tropics. I live in a climate like Mombasa or Zanzibar. So it shades the soil, keeps in moisture. For me, this is good management. That's how I manage my farm. This is an example of a similar one with apricots in Italy. You can see the flowers down there. I remember the field day going there, and all these people were horrified that this woman, this farmer, she let all the place go to rack and ruin. But it's the same thing again. There's not the crop's getting the sunlight first, and the extra sunlight now is using the same ecosystem services as you saw on my place. This is what we want for management. Now let's go over to what is regarded as best practice management of orchards in much of the world and in industrial agriculture. Let's have a look at that. minimal solar capture. More solar energy is going on and baking the bare ground, killing all the microorganisms, than is being used by the crop. There's no fix of nitrogen. That soil's dead. So you have to use nitrogen fertilizer. Buy it. If you don't, with this system, if you don't put on nitrogen fertilizer, you've got no nitrogen. There's no green manure or anything like that to build up fertility, so you have to buy it and bring it in. No flowers to attract beneficial insects, so you have to use pesticides. Without it, you don't get a crop. And they do that because they say it conserves water, but it's the other way around. It doesn't conserve water because the heat, it causes what's called capillary action, causes the moisture to evaporate out of the soil. If you go there and put your hand there, you're looking at dust. Go back to my place under the same heat, and the soil is moist and full of life. And this soil is subject to wind and soil erosion. So they're actually losing the most valuable product, the most valuable thing on earth, topsoil. It's a few centimetres of topsoil that we all depend on. So this is what I want to end on now. And there will be people here speaking about push-pull. Push-pull actually started here in Kenya and is under Dr. Hans Herren when he was head of a CP here in Nairobi, that he set it all up. And push-pull to me is one of the greatest examples of getting science to work on transformation. I'm not going to go and explain to you how it works in corn. What I want to say here is that what's happened with push-pull is other people have looked at it and said, oh, look, if it works in maize, in corn, you know, for instance, in Ethiopia, they said, look, is it going to work on teff or sorghum or millet? And it did. And then someone else says, oh, I wonder if it's going to work on tomatoes. And it did. And chilies. And it did. And so it's taken out. The first one is a mango orchard where they brought in the desmodium, alfalfa, or lucerne, depending on what you want to call it. Desmodium repels pests, suppresses weeds. Alfalfa and desmodium both host beneficial insects, bring in the good guys. And then the other one, Napier grass, traps the pests. I haven't got the time to explain it, but here you've got a system where you've got the pest control. And I can tell you, those mangoes, I love mangoes, and I had trouble getting me out of there. They were so good. And the farmer, whose farm, you know, she now is technically a millionaire, and she employs a husband who was actually chief of police in the local town, but earns more money working for her on her farm. The other thing I liked about too is that the way to control this is bring in cattle, and they graze it down. So now I've got meat, milk, and using the manure, they've got their biogas for all their power, and then the biogas slurry used for compost. It's a highly productive system. And it's the same with this chili one. So I suppose what I want to talk about here is that for the people who doubt it, this revolution is happening. System change is happening. And a lot of this innovation, it's, in the case of push-pull, started by good scientists. We're now seeing farmers adapting it and moving it forward. And this is what we need to do. We need this partnership between researchers and farmers, but also to allow farmers to look at how to make these things work better and scale it up. And we do that, we can feed the world, feed it well, without any toxic pesticides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give another round of applause. And I hope we will come out of here with a new attitude, a system change. Just like many years ago, people like Dr. Hans Herren dreamt. I'm sure that will happen. Our next speaker is from the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. This is a platform or an alliance for all networks in Africa. Dr. Million Belay, they are working in over 50 countries in Africa, and is going to share with us some of his experiences and the work that they do in Africa as the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. Welcome, Dr. Belay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, David. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this chance to address you. I'm so happy to be here. It's always difficult to speak after Andrea. I don't know how many of you know Andrea is a very, very good musician. He's a fantastic singer. I thought I would be given like half an hour or something, but I'm given about 10 minutes. So what I will do is I just go. And I was told that there is another meeting, so the rest I will present it in another meeting. So if you are interested, you can follow me. I'm the coordinator of AFSA. So AFSA is a network of networks. We have 37 members now. As Anne said, out of the 55 countries in Africa, AFSA members work in 50 of them. In some of the countries, Eritrea, Somalia, South Sudan, North Sudan, we don't work. I'm also a member of the IPES Food, International Panel of Experts on the Sustainability of Food. We have Hans and we have Emil here also with me. So what I'm going to do now, first I will ask questions. Questions which are very, very critical for me. The first question is, thank you. So the first question is, how can we produce more food? As we shall see later, almost all of the policies that I know at the continental level and at the country level, in Ethiopia at least, is based on the first question, to answer the first question. How can we produce more food? That's a concern. And we need to ask this question. It's a very critical question. The second question, when you go to the next layer, is how can you produce more but nutritious and healthy food? Is another question. Then the policy that you design will be different than the first one. Then you can ask the third question, the third layer of question, which is how can we produce more food which is nutritious and healthy without affecting the biosphere, the environment? How can we create a resilient food system? Is another level of question, which requires a whole host of approach to our agriculture. It totally differs than the agriculture that we are practicing now when we ask this question. And we can more make it complex by adding another layer, which is how can we produce culturally appropriate food, which is nutritious and healthy and without affecting the biosphere, and in a just way. Then you politicize the question here now. Justice comes in, a question of justice comes here now. So culturally appropriate, justice without affecting the environment, without and nutritious and healthy. This is a very, very important question for me. But unfortunately, the policy is designed just to answer the first question. How can we produce more food? I'll go to that in a little bit. Well, there is no quarrel between those who are promoting industrial agriculture and agroecological forms of agriculture on these questions, on this analysis. There is population explosion, obvious, land and forest degradation, obvious, decrease in biodiversity, cultural erosion, unplanned urbanization. This is frightening in Africa, basically, the way urban areas are expanding without planned. We need urbanization very much, but there are no plan. That's where the question is. And climate change. So anybody, whether he's from industrial agriculture, from organic, or from regenerative, whatever, would agree on these questions. difference is how to answer these challenges. There's a war between two narratives. There's a war of narratives. But you know, it's a very, I'm sorry, this doesn't help. And I mean, if the picture was right, in 1987, this is a map of the southwest of Ethiopia called Gambela, and Gambela specifically at a place called Majankir. In 1987, this is a huge forest block, the yellow becoming the lowland. 2001, a little bit of erosion. 2012 is a lot of degradation of the environment. If you get the map of 2018, it will be quite shocking. What's making that? Agriculture. So we have to address agriculture. It's a pressing agenda than any agenda that I know. So there are two competing narratives for the future of feeding Africa, for the future of agriculture in Africa. One is productivist. The second is agroecological. The first one, as to me and to many of us, probably, the first productivist addresses the first question, and agroecological addresses all of them for me. So, oh my God. So, the productivist narrative is saying that to produce more food, so the agenda is that we have to use agrochemicals, pesticides and artificial fertilizers. We have to use high-yielding varieties. We have to use irrigation. We have to consolidate land. We have to focus on technologies, emerging technologies included. I think this emerging technologies agenda requires a huge conference like this. We don't even know what is coming to this continent, to each of us. A huge continent by itself. Emerging technologies. And training farmers new techniques. This is a push for knowledge substitution, because the knowledge of farmers is considered backward, and as part of the problem, as part of the problem of food shortage. So the first narrative, this narrative has champions. The productivist narrative has champions, and they are very, very powerful. Very powerful. The first batch are the philanthrocapitalists. On this included the Warren Buffett and the Gates and others. You know, they are pushing the productivist narrative. And development agents. Development agents include the USA, CIDA, CIDA, and others. Business. Big business. And we are not against business, but we are against huge business. Because people have to do business after all. So big business, like the Monsantos and the others. And with local scientists, you know, I'm not blanketly assuming that all local scientists are this category. Some of them. There are a lot of local scientists who are concerned about the future of Africa and who are working really, really hard to produce data. My friend is sitting there, I forgot his name now. Is one of them. So it's not a blanket. But I know so many of scientists in this category. Government bureaucracy, NEPAD, CADAP, EU, AUN, REX. At least up to now, the majority of the thinking in the African continent is on the productivist paradigm. And what are the... So, narratives. The industrial agriculture. What are these narratives? One is priority to business to feed Africa. There are a lot of public and private partnership. What are these partnerships? If you look into them in terms of in agriculture, they are mainly a productivist nature. And for business, we have to change our laws. You know, harmonization of seed laws, production of land laws, you know, to make it easier for business to operate in Africa, to produce agriculture to feed Africa. So business, a lot of business interest. And the narrative says, oh, farmer seed is part of the problem. So we have to produce a new seed. We have to come up with a new seed. And we all know that we can enhance the productivity of farmers with farmers and scientists working together. So we're not rejecting science, by the way. Problem is of calories, so more calories is the solution. That's one of the paradigms. And what is driving land appropriation, land grabbing? Oh, land in the hands of African people is not productive, so we have to grab it from them and give it to others. So land grabbing happening both at the country level and international actors coming in. And knowledge comes only from science. The knowledge of farmers is not considered even as important. So we are not using two forms of knowledge, but only knowledge and technology which are coming from outside. And this is the worst part of it, that we can produce one solution and that solution will fit everybody. So there is a solution for Africa. Even my country, Ethiopia, is quite different. The north part of Ethiopia, southeastern is totally different. You cannot produce one policy for all. But the narrative is this one. This is the narrative. By the way, this is not my listing. In 2016 in Ethiopia, we had a huge conference like this. And one of the agendas that we had, the outcome is to identify these narratives. This is a narrative that's identified by that group. It's not my listing. It's a group who have come with this narrative. There are so many of them here. So we know, I'm sure you have seen this slide already. What is a product of this narrative in other continents and in some countries in Africa also? Triple burden of malnutrition. This is not only a European problem, by the way, obesity. I heard the FAO General Director saying that out of the 20 countries who are obese in the world, 8 of them are in Africa. So it's becoming a problem. And the diabetes is rising, you know. These non-communicable diseases are rising. Environmentally unsustainable, I think speaker after speaker have told you about this. I'm not going to bore you on that. Social inequities, poverty, disempowerment is happening, especially in big farms, and neglect of cultural values. This is a very, very critical factor. I am sure this, Emil at least have shown you this diagram. There is an understanding in the world that we have to transform. So transform to the better, sustainable, agroecological form of agriculture. But there are some problems that we have to be careful for us. I will only mention one of them, or two of them, past dependency. Once you go into the path of using a lot of chemicals, if you lose your seeds and go to only high-yielding varieties, and this, to go back to where you are would be quite problematic. Export orientation. Now, even if you go to my country, my sister Il can help me. The focus is export orientation. We have to market-oriented agriculture. That's the talk. What is the consequence of that? And can we go out of that? If we go into that direction, will be the question. This diagram, I hope you have seen it. I hope you've interacted with it. It's a very, very critical diagram. It's called a donut. It's a donut economics. On the outside, you see the 9 planetary boundaries. The 9 planetary boundaries, actually the concept is if the whole world goes out of these 9 planetary boundaries, then it will be in a problem. So the climate change and land use change, biodiversity, they are already passed from the boundaries. And one of the causes of disturbing the 9 planetary boundaries is industrial agriculture. So agroecology is a transformative direction to correct this. And inside, you will have the 12 social boundaries also. So we have to be in the operating space, and agroecology is solution to that. So what's agroecology? I think so action and change that brings sustainability and resistance to all parts of the food system. Ecological, economic, cultural, and social. Agroecology is a science. People say that, oh, farmers' production is not scientific, it's going back, it's backward. But it's a very sophisticated science, agroecology, by the way. It's a very sophisticated soil science. It's a practice. Practices, we have seen the mulching, composting, all that. And it's a social justice movement. It has to be all three, or it is not agroecology. That's where agroecology differs from the others. It's a social movement. Why? It's a fight against those narratives that I have identified. Do I have time? So these are some of the practices, agroecological practices that we will discuss in the next one. You know, the monoculture system, industrial agriculture, you know, if you have this, if you take the environment separately, and if you look at erosion control, carbon sequestration, pollination, water regulation, timber production, maintenance of biodiversity, the monoculture system, the high input agricultural system, basically is good in crop production, can produce crop, but very bad in the others. But the agroecology is good in all of them. That's the last message that I want to leave you with. If you are interested to discuss about agroecology, I think as a Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, we want to prove for ourselves whether agroecology works or not. And we've collected cases from all over Africa, and we have analyzed them. We did a meta-level analysis of these case studies, and we have a story. And some of the little part of the story, I will tell you when you come to the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Million. So, breakout session 9, you'll learn from Million whether agroecology can feed the world. Our next presenter comes from the Ministry of Health, and she's also going to speak on policy issues. She is a nutritionist and is going to share with us some of the trends that she has seen, especially in Kenya. Please clap for Miss Gladys Mugambi.
Good afternoon. After the men have spoken and given us a lot of details, I'm going to just share with you the problems they have presented is causing to us. It's creating another problem. Just a bit of what it is that we are facing right now. I don't know whether that's my presentation, really. Where is it? Okay, I may even just talk. So I'm just linking nutrition, health, and agriculture. And, sorry. Now, those who think they have no time for healthy eating will sooner or later have to find time for illness. How many of you are facing an illness? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. That you are really taking your time to manage. It's about food, variety, eaten frequently, and in the right amounts. We are talking about food security. What is it leading to? In the world, about 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient malnutrition. We have over 2 billion adults who are obese and overweight. That has been mentioned. We have what we call stunting, and we have overweight of children, about 41 million. And this here is results of the micronutrient survey conducted in Kenya. And we have a problem with zinc, and we have a serious problem with vitamin A and iron and iodine. But you can see zinc is a big issue. Over 60% of men, women, children, when you see all those, are suffering from zinc deficiency. Now, when we talk about the problem of stunting, some of us just think of the food, the carbohydrates and the protein. But we know zinc and iron have a relationship with stunting. So, why are we talking about nutrition? It's about our well-being. It will boost our the gross national product by 11% in Africa and Asia. It will prevent child deaths. It will improve school attainment because it has to do with the brain. It increases wages, reduces poverty, and breaks the intergenerational cycle of poverty. Now, this is the situation in terms of the micronutrient deficiencies in all forms, which we are facing in the world. There are linkages. There are linkages between the stunting and the obesity in adulthood. So if you're obese right now, it might not be your problem, but it could be your problem. You are the one maybe who has caused it. But it could be because there was stunting in childhood. Stunting starts when the child is in the womb. What the mother is eating and how the mother is living will lead to how the baby will be. Because we have very little time, I want to show you a few pictures. But before that, we are talking about, when we talk about nutrition, it's about the nutrients and the safety. Because when the food is contaminated, the nutrients are not available, the nutrients are distorted, and from the plant up to what you find on the plate is not as expected, is not of high quality. Now the egg is starting to lose its shape. Ask, which is the egg? Is it the egg from the chicken? The nutrition, right from the soil. The soil has no nutrients. That has been said. The way we manage our crop, which has been presented, what is it around it? Are you putting chemicals? And the way you handle it in terms of processing and packaging it for people to consume. That means harvest and post-harvest handling, preparation in readiness for consumption, and the health of an individual and ability to be able to absorb those nutrients. We are talking about all this having a problem. All of them. We have poor health, but the main cause could be the food we eat. Now, I brought this here because we have had a discussion about our crops being sprayed, but sometimes you see a crop like that, I'm not sure you people will tell me, and you think it is a pest, and you start spraying it. But that crop could be missing calcium. Am I right? You're quiet. Another one could be looking like this. It's lacking manganese. And you come and tell me it is a disease. So I start spraying it, isn't it? The other is zinc in our maize, missing. Then we say it's a disease. That is another challenge that is coming. What does it lead to? obesity in children, obesity in adults. This is very worrying. Children being born with disabilities. And the main one here is when we talk about folic deficiency, this is how children are born. And this is irreversible. Our brains are not properly formed, and that is also irreversible. Our children are stunted. Those are two children of the same age. One is shorter than the other. And it is irreversible. That is the problem we have to face as a government. I've come from government, but sometimes we start asking, I've already heard we are going to talk about policy. Kenya has a policy on food security and nutrition. Who implements? Who grows the food? It is the farmer. But at the end of the day, people will ask, government, what are you doing? So Kenya has a policy. Kenya has guidelines. But some policies and some guidelines need to be revisited. I'm talking from the nutrition side, but the agriculture people could be having a policy on fertilizer. What is it that is in the fertilizer that could be affecting us? So no matter how much it gets abused, the body can restore balance. The first rule is to stop interfering with nature. We've interfered a lot, so the body is not able to handle this. So most of us are spending time and money in the hospital, and we are spending a lot of money to keep the health sector working. But the problem is not the health ministry.
Ladies and gentlemen, can agroecology feed the world? Of course it can, and it will do so in the future. Now let me tell you my basis for saying this. Yesterday, the United Nations released its latest population report, and it showed that the rate of global population increase is falling dramatically, and has been for quite a long time, continuing the trend of recent decades. And by 2050, 30 years from now, human fertility rates will be almost at replacement levels, which, as you know, about 2.1. Our global population is nearly leveling off to a near zero rate of annual increase in just 3 decades. Think about that for a moment. This is a huge positive development. What does it mean for the future of agriculture? It means something very significant and very different from what you have been hearing from all quarters of conventional agriculture. It means that the rate at which global food production needs to increase in order to provide a good, healthy diet for every one of us on Earth is also falling dramatically as well. During the past half-century, food production did have to increase at a very rapid rate, about 2% per year, in fact, because population growth rates were also increasing at a fast pace. Indeed, the population increased by 300% in the past 45 years. But between now and 30 years ahead of us, 2050, the world's population will only increase by an additional 29% compared to 300%. Thus, the annual increase in food production will only need to be less than 1% per year. The need for increase is declining rapidly, and it will be easy to achieve considering the historical record that we've seen in the past 50 years. But it gets better. For the annual increase in the population will continue to decline until by the second half of the 21st century, after 2050, global population will be just about completely leveled off. It'll be nearly totally flat in the second half of the century. By then, the annual increase in food production that will be needed to sustain us all will have also declined to nearly 0% increase per year. Not actually zero, but close to zero. So what does this mean for us who dream of an agroecological future? Well, I think that it means something very significant indeed. It means that now there is actually no real future threat of global food deficits. It means there is no basis for saying, as Big Ag is constantly telling us, that we must pull out all the stops to increase food production in every possible way. Baloney. It's no longer true. The data are very clear, and it surprises me how little emphasis these important data get, but perhaps together we can make it clear to others. So, we've said that it'll be easy, and as global diets also shift to a better balance of diversified food products and away from the overconsumption of meat today, the task of feeding everyone on Earth quite well will have become even easier. Perhaps, as they say, a cakewalk. This will open up a vast and expansive window, enabling us to transform the entire global food production system to one that will universally harvest or harness agroecological principles and practices. If we can get this message across, that we don't need to buy the argument that we have to massively increase food production as fast as we can and do everything possible to do it, then we can transform agriculture in an ecological way. And I think this is going to be a key issue for our movement in the future. Like Luke Skywalker says, the Force is with us. The force of current and future trends is telling us about the day of universal agroecology within our sights. Now that is something to reflect on. But of course there is one significant caveat to this story, and that is the trend of population growth and food production in Africa. I've been talking about the global situation, but in Africa, the rate of population growth is still, as we all know, galloping along, and it is in contrast to virtually everywhere else in the world. But even here, population growth rates are beginning to slow down, and in several more decades, they will be much, much slower than today. Meanwhile, the continent's food deficit, however, is increasing. There are many hungry people in Africa, and most of those people are actually small-scale farmers. We know that the major way to overcome Africa's food deficits and food insecurity can only be achieved, as someone mentioned this morning, if Africa's own food suppliers, the 100 million small-scale farmers, can dramatically increase their own production levels. And to do that, they have to expand their use of agroecological practices in ways that take advantage of Africa's unique conditions. Now, these are things that are happening out there, and there are things happening out there in Africa at a big scale that are very encouraging indeed. And I'd like to talk about the achievement not of a green revolution in Africa, but of an evergreen revolution. Trends that I would like to show you today that are giving us the way forward. Okay. Slide's not changing. Yeah? Slide's not changing. Oh, here we go. Okay. Wow. Now, could you go back to the beginning of the presentation? I think I'm halfway through. Okay, right. Well, indeed, you know that during the 1980s, at the close of the massive drought that the drylands in Africa experienced for about a decade and a half, farmlands were practically stripped of trees all across the drylands, particularly in the Sahel, where you see here. But over the last couple of decades, things have been actually changing for the better in a dramatic way. And it's still not working. Or maybe it's very slow. Yeah, okay. This is a farm in Niger where you find a medium to high density of trees that have been regenerated by the farm family. This has been done over such a wide area now in this particular country, 7 million hectares, that has been called the greatest environmental positive transformation that we have seen in Africa. And I'll have to start pushing my slide about 2 minutes before I want to change it, so it actually, okay, here we are. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like in Niger and parts of Mali and Senegal, etc. This is not a forest. This is all cropland that was regenerated with trees, indigenous trees, that farmers selected and nurtured and managed for many useful purposes. And they did it all on their own. There was some extension, there was some policy influences, but 2 million farmers have done this in Niger. And this movement is now spreading all across the region. And recent data published in Science shows that, in fact, tree foliage cover is increasing across the entire Sahel. And that is the net primary productivity due to the increases in trees. If we want to talk about an agroecology system for Africa, we have a demonstration on a vast scale of agroecology with trees right here in the Sahel. And so, we're engaged in the Evergreening Global Alliance in further accelerating that process by working with scores and scores of organizations, civil society, and governments in all of the countries in the drylands and subhumid areas to enable this to continue to spread. Now, there's a global story that is also very interesting and very little known, because this was just published a couple of years ago in Nature. But currently, would you believe that almost half of all of the agricultural land in the world has more than 10% tree cover? This is just the farmland of the world, about 2 billion hectares, more than 10% tree cover. And in some regions, such as Southeast Asia, Central America, etc., tree cover on agricultural land now exceeds 45%. And in South Asia, subhumid Africa, and other regions, it's between 10 and 30%. So let's take a look. Here's a map of that increase in tree cover as expressed in terms of the additional biomass that is accumulating and being stored on the land as a result of this tree cover increase. And in fact, it's happening in many parts of the world. Yes, indeed it is. During the last decade, there was an increase of biomass carbon on agricultural land of almost 5%. And the annual rate of increase of biomass carbon due to trees is now about 740 million tons of CO2 per year. Now, that's about a third of the narrow sense total emissions of agriculture, from livestock methane, from rice production, and from soil respiration due to soil degradation. This is already 1/3 offsetting that, and it's continuing to increase. Really good news. Well, this is a shot of Southeast Asia, which is one of the regions of the world that has the most biomass increase per hectare. It's really quite substantial because farmers are going into agroforestry quietly, but at a very large scale. What's really interesting are countries like India, China, and Brazil, where you see this increase in tree cover also playing out, and has been further accelerated by a very forward-looking agroforestry national policy that India has just enacted. So India's tree cover is increasing quite rapidly. China has been going into agroforestry in certain parts of the country, and this is an example of wheat production with timber trees intercropped with the wheat. And the beautiful thing is that the timber trees, in this case Paulownia, are deciduous, so they don't have leaves during the wintertime and they don't shade the wheat crop. So you're getting 2 crops at a time, a higher land equivalent ratio. Well, you know, Hans, I was just at the World Congress of Agroforestry a few weeks ago in Montpellier, France, where we were looking at all sorts of agroforestry systems that are coming up in Europe, and this is one of them, where walnuts or poplar or other trees are being incorporated into wheat production systems. And the great news is that the Common Agricultural Policy is now seriously supporting the development of agroforestry in Europe, and we're going to see a lot of this development coming up. And so, I guess we have a clap for that. Must be a European in the crowd. But I'm still waiting for my slide to change here. There we go. So why don't we, folks, start thinking about stretch goals? If we know that the world's agricultural land is already increasing in tree cover at a rapid clip, why don't we double or triple it? Because remember, all of these trees that are going out there on farmers' fields are not being subsidized, they're not being paid for, they're being planted or regenerated by farmers who are making money from doing so. That's what's happening, and we're so unaware of this phenomenon. So I'm proposing that we double and triple the rate at which we increase tree cover on agricultural land through the development of agroforestry systems. Now, there are many ways, as you all know, to dramatically increase the tree cover in agriculture, and these are some of the major ways in which it has been happening, and in fact provide a basis for how farmers integrate trees into agriculture successfully. Now, yesterday, Hans told us that agroforestry was a part of sustainable agriculture, a part of agroecology. He made it quite small. You know, the font size of agroforestry is a bit small, so you might have missed it. So I wanted to show you that slide again, because I think that one of our great opportunities in the agroecological community is to combine efforts with the agroforestry community, which has not been done successfully and which has tremendous potential for the future. So I make a bid to all of you in agroecological networks to get in touch, and let's work together on the ways in which agroforestry can contribute to those agroecological systems. And indeed, Hans did show some trees in his presentation yesterday, the combination of Acacia albida with maize production, which is one of our major opportunities here for integrating trees into crop systems in Africa. Whoops. But I want to end my presentation by reminding us of a dire warning that came out in the IPCC 1.5C report last October, in which they said that we must immediately decarbonize the global economy. We knew that. We must also recapture hundreds of billions of tons of CO2 back out of the atmosphere. Now that is a troubling situation. But there are biological approaches to capture carbon, and these are the ones that they mentioned in the report: protecting our current forests, restoring degraded forest lands, increasing tree cover on agricultural lands, and increasing the biomass production of pasture. But they also mentioned something else which was really disturbing. There it is. They actually indicated that we will have to convert 500 million hectares of agricultural land to energy crops in order to produce this carbon capture and storage. Now, is that possible? Is it possible? Half a billion hectares? Not at all. We're going to have to do this some other way. And the question I ask you is, are there alternative ways to increase carbon capture that would not require the conversion of agricultural land? Are there ways to deploy that on farmlands that could increase crop production? Absolutely. And we've been working on these for decades. These are methods of including in crop fields dense populations of shrubs, leguminous shrubs that increase crop yields at the same time that they increase the production of wood for fuel and electrical power. And this is how it looks in Zambia, where 70,000 farmers are producing their maize with Gliricidia shrubs and cut them back at the end of the dry season, providing biofertilizer, fodder, and wood fuel for their household or for power generation. This is how it looks when they finish their harvest. And then, during the crop season, these leguminous shrubs, which may be up to 5,000 per hectare, are not competing with the crop because they only grow when the maize is harvested, and they produce their wood during the dry season. And so, what's interesting is that we're finding that farmers are seeing dramatic increases in crop yields as a result of simply including these leguminous trees in their fallow or in their maize production systems. Whether on experiment station work like this or on farmers' fields, we have a dramatic increase in crop production. About a doubling in Malawi. And so, what we found is that in Sri Lanka, they have commercialized this system. They are now using Gliricidia for power generation in a number of power plants, and they're expanding this process. And my slide clicker is just about ready to die. It's just not moving anymore. But she thinks I need to end, so maybe I should. Yeah, this is a case of one of the village-sized units. And they're also producing units up to 10 megawatts of power from the production of Gliricidia shrubs in their maize production systems in Sri Lanka. So we can produce electrical power and produce all of these social, economic, and biophysical benefits as a result of simply putting leguminous shrubs into smallholder cropping systems. Now, we're working with countries all over Africa to implement these kind of agroecological systems with agroforestry. And we're making a lot of progress because we're working with so many different organizations. And I'm almost finished. There we are. This is called the Evergreening Global Alliance, which involves development NGOs, conservation NGOs, research organizations, and others. And if you are interested, then please get in touch and we'll start working together. And my last slide is the inspiring words of R. Buckminster Fuller, And I think this is very, very cogent for agroecology. You know, we always talk about fighting the big ag interests, etc. Well, Fuller says you never change anything by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garrity. I feel sad that I had to make you hurry up because you had such a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I think we need to clap for all our presenters once more. The next presenter will be Barbara Zilli, who will be coming to give us a case study and what they are doing, and she will also speak with the farmer from Ethiopia on the drivers of change for sustainable nutrition based on nutrition in mountain ecosystems. Karibu, Barbara.
Asante. Hello, good afternoon. I give you a quick glimpse of one of our projects, which is nutrition in mountainous areas, mountain agroecosystems. Wait, now I have to go back. So, here, nutrition in mountain agroecosystems, in short, NMA. We don't have much time, so I go very quickly through, but if you want more information, go to our webpage. You find a lot of information. We have also blogs, and we write a lot about it, so you find really good information there. The project is about replication and scaling up of good agriculture practices to improve nutrition. That means agriculture practices with a lens of the nutrition perspective. And we want to replicate it and scale it up, and we build up a national action network or global action network with a lot of RSPs, rural service providers in local communities. How does NMA positions itself? Hello. It works in mountain agroecosystem, and it is located in 5 different mountain ranges in the Himalayas, in the Hindu Kush, in Pamir Tian Shan, that is in Asia, and then in Latin America we work in the Andes, and in Africa we are in the African highlands. And NMA also tries to promote nutrition-sensitive agriculture, and it's about replication and scaling, so it positions itself directly in the middle of those 3 circles. It wants to diversify the diets to combat stunting, to combat malnutrition, and it promotes, facilitates agriculture and marketing practices, and it addresses poverty and malnutrition. Many of you will know this framework. It's the UNICEF framework on the causes of malnutrition. That shows us that causes of malnutrition are multi-sectoral, and they embrace food, health, and caring practices, and they are also on different levels. They play on individual levels and also household levels, and political levels or underlying levels. And NMA interventions are addressing 2 levels. Those are the underlying causes and the basic causes. And the underlying causes are at household levels, and the basic causes are at national level. And we try to intervene on those 2 levels. We defined 10 sustainable ways to do changes. You can see here I listed those 10 different ways, and all of them are aiming at improving the food system at different levels. Here on the top you see that it can should have an impact on services, or it can have also an impact on influencing on the policy environment. And all of them should influence the food system in total. So what I will do now, we have been working with RSPs, with rural service providers. So we selected rural service providers in each country, and we did a capacity building program with them, which lasted about half a year. And within that year, they designed a small project, a kind of micro-interventions, how we called them, for their own community, for their own district or for their own village they are working in. And they designed those projects and also implemented it with the help of NMA. And we have finalized already a number of 150 more or less interventions. And all of them are falling into one of those 10 categories. So I would like to present here the first one on training on extension on production systems. We all know that practical know-how is needed, that skills are needed, and we need to share this information. This is the basis to improve nutrition. And so we did trainings. Here we see on that picture that is in Nepal, where a cooperative group is talking about nutrition and is giving training about nutrition-sensitive agriculture. We give trainings on compost, on manure, on different sustainable practices, and also on promotion of rainwater, or harvesting and drip irrigations, and facilitating market access. And our allies in that case are the agricultural department, the local NGOs, and the farmer cooperatives. We have created this network, which I was talking about. We call it MAN. It's accessible also in the internet, and it is expanding slowly. We started with 5 countries in those 5 mountain regions, and now we are with 9 countries. And all the rural service providers have access to this platform. They also have access through a mobile app, which we recently launched. And they can exchange what they do in their own village or what they do as a micro-intervention, and they can also stimulate discussions. It's directly for each region. They also translate. They speak in their own languages, but there's also a global platform where they can exchange between continents. That's how it looks like. And this is for Nepal, for example. Oh, those were actually hidden, but now I see they are on. Because we don't have time to go into that. So one is promoting local food and healthy diets. We did a few interventions on this category, and it indeed doesn't work as fast as I would like. So I just wanted to give you a few examples on NMA impact on policies. Because we had also interventions where we said, where rural service providers got in contact and influenced and lobbied with policymakers. And Nepal, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land Management and Cooperative has published now learnings and experience of the first phase of this project in their report on food and nutrition security in Nepal. Also Pakistan, the Sun Network has introduced a chapter on NSA in the action plan of multi-sectoral nutrition strategy. So my time is almost up. This is important because we have also we monitored the WDDS, the Diet Diversity Score, and we found through this interventions, in each country, the food groups have increased by 1 whole food group. So now I would like to call Yeshimenwet from Ethiopia to talk a bit about the Ethiopian micro-interventions.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Yeshimenwet, a public health specialist and assistant professor in public health nutrition in Ethiopia. And okay. Now let's present with the achievement of micro-intervention in Ethiopia. On behalf of the RSP in Ethiopia. Okay. 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 So I just start with the narrative from one beneficiary from Enemia. She narrates that there is a change in their behavior to have diverse diet. So this diverse diet is due to the intervention in Ethiopia. There is an institution for sustainable development, and it have implementing EOA for more than 20 years. And this micro-intervention were implemented in 5 regions of Ethiopia with 4 micro-intervention clusters. And by 23 rural service providers, that rural service providers were empowered and competed with the micro-intervention project. Now, this involving the stakeholder is one strategy to have this implementation, and involving other health extension workers is another strategy to achieve more on this nutrition-sensitive agriculture. And we do have the MAN platform. We communicate our practices. And this is what we have done before the real implementation in 4 intervention areas. There is processing or production. So we do have compost preparation and organic pesticide from cattle urine, and processing, and also we do have mass message from a food fair festival. We do have 2 food fair festivals in order to revive the cultural and nutritious food in that area. And this is another intervention. Mushroom in our country, particularly in rural community, was not edible before. And we designed a strategy to produce this mushroom and change their behavior, and they started to consume this mushroom. And this is another technology which supports food processing, particularly for the false banana. Before this technology, the woman can scrap like that, and it is energy consuming and time consuming process. Then after, it is improved, but it is in a small scale. So our intervention were statistically tested with a quantitative result. We do have 440 reproductive age women were involved in this micro-intervention with these 4 intervention categories. The first is production, dietary diversity promotion, access to market, food processing, and handling the post-harvest. So this is how the change on production after the intervention. The change in dietary diversity was mentioned before, and this is a change on production after intervention. And this is how this intervention was tested with statistical significance. It have significant difference on production and dietary diversity. So as a conclusion, we conclude that this NMA intervention, even if it's small, it is effective and statistically significant and having a large effect to intervene. So now we are scaling up this nutrition-sensitive intervention as shift from individual RSP to institutional RSP. So the RSP institution can cover half of the cost of this micro-intervention, and we will plan to implement from 2018 to 2021. So we do have 7 intervention clusters in our country to implement for the future. So we do have the best opportunity in paper as well as in practice. So our government policies and strategy can support this NMA practice. So let's to have small application. So small application is the best than any theoretical implementation that we have. And this is all what I have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Would like now to call our panel members to come up. Sylvia, Esther, the people sitting in the panel, Dr. Mokaya, Dr. Andrelu, Dr. Belay, we are coming up here now. Gladys, Carol. A lot of the people coming up are practitioners, farmers, people who are running organic restaurants, working with the prisoners and the rest. And they're all going to have about 3 minutes to speak about the work they've done and the experiences, lessons learned, and how they can work together. So the first to speak will be Caroline Bugwa. Carol, would you like to sit there or come here? Okay, I think come here is better so that we can see you. Yeah. Carol Boga is one of the directors of Bridges Organic Restaurant, one of the first restaurants providing organic food in Kenya, and she's going to share the experiences. Karibu.
Okay, good afternoon. My name, like you've heard, is Caroline Bugwa, and I work for Bridges Organic Restaurant, which is a restaurant located here in Nairobi. Just a bit of a background, we've been here for 11 years now. Sorry? Okay. Apologize. Yes, we've been here for 11 years, and our experience with organic has been transitional, let me say. At the beginning, of course, not everyone, in terms of the market, truly understood what organic was, but as we are now facing, lifestyle diseases, and a lot of health awareness, is going on. There's a lot of interest now in Bridges in terms of what it is that we offer. So we're having more people coming in and asking us for solutions. I was to speak also on discussions. Okay. Well, maybe I can just, briefly give you, as in a little bit about what we're doing at Bridges in terms of the way forward. We have a vision 2030 as a company, and that is to have impacted 1 million families into healthy organic lifestyle. And we do that through a variety of ways. We have an extreme wellness club, which is a collection of healthy-minded individuals. And what we do is that we educate them, as various things in regards to organic farming. So we have organic farming classes. We as a group go together to visit organic farms that we are actually getting supplies from. And then we do cooking classes to understand how to prepare these meals. And most of all, we have a nutritionist who works with us in terms of how it is that we can get the most out of this very precious food. Other than that, our restaurant is also very focused on healthy alternatives. So other than serving organic food, we have a vegetarian and a non-vegetarian selection of meals. And we do a lot of juicing. So for those who just, who understand juicing in the room, I'm sure you know the benefits of that. So we really promote that as a way for people to clean up the toxins that that they're getting from, as in not eating organic food. So we really promote juicing and cleansing, and we have a detox program that we take people through, and that's divided in 10 days, 5 days, 3 days, and 1 day. Other than that, we have a value-added product line, and we do offer an organic basket program. So for those who might want to take organic home, that is also possible at Bridges. So I understand my time is very, very brief, but I just want to, to invite everyone to experience Bridges. Like I said, we are right in town. If you have a chance to visit downtown, we are off Koinange Street by the City Market on Tubman Road. So karibu, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Our next speaker is Sylvia Kuria. Sylvia Kuria is a young organic farmer who's going to share with us how she decided to become an organic farmer and her experiences.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to try and sum up everything in the 3 minutes I have. And let me just ask, how did I start growing organic? And basically, I started when I decided to start growing safe food for my family and for my young children, And we're asking ourselves here, how do we feed Africa safe food? We know that it's possible, but I want to ask you, how can I feed myself safe food? That's where I started from. And what I normally say is feed yourself first. And right now, when I went, growing just safe food for my family, I actually found that, my kids, we're actually eating a wide variety of vegetables. Like in 1 week, we're actually eating between 10 to 20 different types of vegetables the whole week. My kids had lots of allergies, and now they're all gone. My daughter had very bad asthma, and my son had got food allergies, and that's all gone because we're just eating safe food. And when you think about the small-scale farmer out there, most of them have got at least like half an acre or only just 1 acre of land. And yet, when you talk about the money, we tell them, grow one crop, and that one crop is going to give you some income. But these same farmers don't even have their daily food. And what we're seeing is, how do we make sure that these farmers have got enough food? And that's how I started. So what you do, like what we've done basically, is just to make sure that we train the farmers to start first by having a home garden. Be able to feed yourself first and then sell your surplus. And that's how my business started, With time, we actually had more than enough. We actually started with half an acre, and now we have grown to, a much bigger piece of land, And now we actually have a business where we have the home baskets, and people, are buying the vegetables from us. And, when you think about, the environment and what we are doing, when I started doing, the farming, it was basically just for food. But with time, we have grown trees. Now we have lots of trees on the farm. We have been working on our soils. And, it's just wonderful, just listening to, like Andre Lou and just thinking about his farm. It's very similar to mine. We have lots of flowers. And now my kids are, looking for frogs. We have lots of frogs on the farm. They take them back to the pond, And because of what we have done on the land is now rewarding us. Second thing I just want to talk about briefly is about the huge gap that we have between science and practice. I find, like when we are here, we are a few young people here, and we are learning so much. But when we go out there, these things that have been researched for so many years, and, scientists have taken so much time in the lab to learn all these things. But the practice, many years from now, will it be able to impact what we are learning here? Will it be able to impact the farmer on the ground? And when you have more young people here, then they are able to actually, learn more things and be able to implement them back on the farms. But if we don't have young people involved then, we're just talking to ourselves, basically, And the work we're doing here is basically for farmers. But the truth is, on the ground, it's hardly felt. We hardly feel the impact of the science that's happening all around, And when we think about the way forward, when I started growing trees, I didn't know how to grow trees, so I just took myself to ICRAF, and they showed me how to grow trees, and I got my seeds there. And right now, I actually have a tree nursery with more than 6,000 indigenous trees that we are growing on our farm and sharing with the community, And, like when you think about it, this is me, one person doing it. What if we were 10 of us in each county doing that? The impact will be much more. So just finally, just to re-emphasize, as we talk about how to feed Africa with safe food, we first need to ask ourselves, are these farmers themselves eating safe, nutritious food? And then we can be able to think about scaling up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. You should, I don't know if your farm is one of the farms you're visiting on Friday?
Yes, it is.
So those who want to visit Sylvia's farm, you'll be very impressed. It's just out of Nairobi in Limuru. Our next speaker is Esther Bett. Esther Bett is a farmer and an activist. She has been working on fighting for farmers' rights and fighting GMOs. She's going to share with us her experiences. Karibu sana, Esther.
Thank you, Anne. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Esther Bett, and as Anne has explained, I'm a farmer. I farm in the western part of Kenya. I grew up on a large-scale farm, Kenyan standard, because in the Rift Valley we have larger farms on dairy, but I grew up on a tea farm. My farmers did tea and dairy. And now that they are gone, I have to work on that farm. But more than that, I'm an activist. I fight for farmers' rights, and my fighting for farmers' rights started with the structural adjustment programs in Kenya when the government withdrew subsidies and we wanted to process and sell our own milk. We started a small plant in Nandi Hills to sell milk in Kisumu, but government officials came to close down the plant. I worked with the Ministry of Agriculture at that time, and that's how my journey in activism started, because I had to fight along my father and the other farmers to make sure that we had our own plant that paid us better and actually got our cows treated better. And from then, I've never gone back. I've been active in the campaign against GMOs in Kenya, and I think a lot of you have seen a photo of a lady standing with placards. That's me. I've been doing rounds in the newspaper for the last 2 years with the same photo, and we have worked very hard in this country. We've changed the trade relation bills. We worked through the Economic Partnership Agreement. And so far, Kenya has not really ratified it, and we are still fighting as Kenyan farmers to get a fair trade opportunity as Kenyan farmers and to be protected from goods that are dumped on our market that destroy our farmers. But today I want to talk about Esther, the activist, who also sits in the African Organic Network. Because as a result of this movement in Africa, we felt like as African farmers, we needed a platform where African farmers can speak about their rights. So in 2004, the African Organic Network was registered. It's housed in Dar es Salaam in the office of TWAM, but we've successfully organized several opportunities and conferences in partnership with other people and the contribution of farmers and activists world over for African farmers to get a place to speak and to showcase that agroecology can work for Africa. We have our champions in this field who have worked so hard to ensure that organic agriculture and agroagriculture works in Africa. As a person on my daily basis, I work for an organization called Resources Oriented Development Initiatives. RODI does social justice, but social justice in agroecology. We work with the communities through schools, but we also work through prisons. We walk into prisons and work with prisoners and prison staff to learn to do agroecology, agriculture. We train the prisoners. But we also realized in restorative justice, when people work the land, people who are traumatized interact with land and nature, they heal. So we are actually helping prisoners heal and interact with nature. And as we heal the soil, we relate the healing of the soil with their character, and we transform them when they are inmates. When they come out, they form community groups, and we work with the community groups. As I speak, we are working with over 30 prisons, and we are working with over 70 community groups formed by reformed ex-prisoners who are producing organically and passing the message in the community. And as I speak, we are proud to say about 3 or 4 of our ex-prisoners are actually selling in the organic market. In the schools, we realized that most of the prisoners were young men, and we decided we'll not wait for them to come to prison. So we went to schools. Right now, we are working with over 35 primary schools on permaculture, teaching children to love nature, to grow trees, to plant food, to harvest water, and to cook the food that they are growing themselves and share the surplus. A lot of families have become food secure. And right now, over 50% of the schools we are having are actually having school feeding programs, because the children sometimes never came to school because they weren't having enough food. So we are having healthier children, performing better, being less absent, but producing their own food. But apart from that, their families are now food secure. If you are around long enough, please visit our center on the Eastern Bypass. We are actually showcasing how to produce biofertilizers, how to do urban farming, how to do green walls in urban areas, and how to produce organic pesticides that can actually make us be safe. And we have proved that growing organic and eating organic is the way to go. It's only up to you to choose what you want to do. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Esther. I think we've had so much, and we could be having some questions. I'm going to open this up for questions. I won't let the others speak because they had a chance to give a presentation, but you can ask them questions. So I want to see the questions that we have, starting from this direction. Okay, this direction. Hans, Lavi, Wanjiro. Did I see another hand? That end? Okay. The mic, start with Dr. Heron.
Thank you. Miriam, I have a question about your slide on Gambela and the disappearing of the forest. How much of that land which is taken is land grab and large-scale agriculture versus small farmers? Because there's a lot of this going on in Ethiopia. I just wonder if you have any idea.
Thank you. The next question from Justus.
Thank you. For agroecology to work and all the agriculture that we are talking about, water is very essential. And in our countries, we are affected by droughts and floods. I've not had a lot of reference to runoff rainwater harvesting. Is there anybody who has a technology or a way to assist us, small-scale farmers, to carry out rainwater harvesting, especially the runoff?
Okay, thank you. There's a lady on that end.
Thank you all for your good presentations. My name is Wanjiro Kamau. An independent consultant, but for a long time working with corn. Zili, I was very interested in your presentation. For one, it wasn't clear to me why you identified the mountainous regions to work with, perhaps because we have hilly areas and mountainous areas in Kenya. It would be good to know why this was a target group. Was there particular deficiency? And share with us why, because I thought the outcomes were quite interesting. And also to Sylvia, perhaps it would be good to share with us, the young generation today are keen on profits. Like we always say, the current farmer is above 59 years. So we are trying to find a way of bringing in young people particularly into agroecology. I know you are keen because you have children. For young people who are not mothers or fathers yet, how do we really motivate them to come into agroecology, and particularly the fact that they are very good with technology and they are very keen on making a lot of money? How do we motivate them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question to Zachary. The back.
Thank you very much. I have listened to all the presentations, and I'm very, very impressed by what is coming out from the ground, what people are doing. This is there to encourage us. Now, there was a lady called Mother Teresa, if you remember her. One time she was asked a question, what you are doing is so good, but I think it's like a drop in the ocean. I want to tell you what she said, and I'm sure this is going to encourage all of you here. She said, yes, what I'm doing is like a drop in the ocean, but if all of us did these small things, good practices, encouraging people here, working with the children, then we shall create an ocean of good things. So just get encouraged that what you're hearing from people should encourage us even as we go home. Remember what I said yesterday? Let us all aspire as we go out of this room, we have something that we can do to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zachary. I think my final question is to Carolina. You talked about having been running a restaurant for like over 10 years, an organic restaurant. Maybe you can share with us some of the challenges you have faced over the years and how you have overcome them. And then we'll begin with Sylvia, then Carol, and then Dr. Million and Barbara to answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe just to answer you, Mr. Lavi, about the runoff. On Friday, if you manage to come to our farm, you'll actually see how we have actually used the hill on the farm to actually be able to capture so much rainwater and bring it down to our dams. And when you think about the cost of digging out the dam and putting in the dam liner, it's actually cheaper than buying the tanks. And it has actually worked for us so far. As you know, last year, we had very good rains and were able to capture water that kept us for a whole year until this year, May. And that really helped us to actually be able to keep farming all through. But I agree with you that the issue is big. Even when I work with the local women, that's normally a very big issue for them. They say we're happy to do all these things. We know about them, but we don't have any water. For example, in my village, the women need at least about €3 or $3 or 300 Kenya shillings roughly, to buy water that will last them only 2 days. So when you tell such a lady to keep that water to plant trees, to do this and the other, and have a garden, she'll say it's totally impossible. So it's been a very difficult thing for us, but what we do, we normally tell them, just start off with your home garden. You can be able to grow just a few lines of vegetables, When you have your surplus, we are going to buy that surplus from you, which gives you more money in the pocket that now you can be able to use to do other things with. So it's a slow step, but it's possible, and it can be done. But I agree with you. And then to answer you, Wanjiro, about the young people, it's true what you're saying. Even in the local meetings that we go in my village, I'm the youngest. And, you find that young people are not involved in farming, mainly because we don't involve them, because we don't capture them early. Like for me, I started my farming and loving farming in the 4K clubs. The Kenyans know what that is. But these were basically some clubs that were in the primary schools where we used to have gardens, about farming, and that's where I loved farming. But right now, when you think about the system that we have in education, we are not getting the young people early enough, We're not getting them in primary school. And something else we're also doing is we normally work with kids in primary and kids in high school. You talked about the profits, They want the money quick, That's a difficult one. That's not easy because, as you know, when you talk about organic and agroecology, it actually takes time. It's difficult for me to watch grass and trees grow on my farm. It's difficult, but they are growing and they are coming up. When you think about technology, when you get the young people here, and I've seen quite a number of them doing the video, the pictures, they're learning and they're getting, what's happening here. But if we're able to involve them with technology, because we need the technology, we don't know how to be able to get this information out, but if we involve them and tell them, you also have a part to play, you can actually be able to help us be on Facebook, on Twitter, and all those things. So we need to involve them more, and more mainly from when they are very young. So we need to capture them in nursery school, in primary, until now when they get to campus, they'll be able to be happy to go into the field. Yeah,
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah.
Okay, Andre.
Capture. There's a very strong relationship between the amount of soil organic matter and water capture. And it gets back to what I started with soil health. Most soils in Africa and in my country and in much of Asia I look at have less than 1% organic matter. Now, when we analyse their ability to capture rain, they actually lose something like 98% of the rainfall through a combination of evaporation and runoff. Less than 2% infiltrates. These soils, because they have 1% or less organic matter, the most that they can capture per hectare in the first 60 centimetres is about 160,000 litres. Now, if you increase your soil organic matter up to around 6%, and I'm using 6% because this is what I did in my own farm, you can capture close to a megalitre per hectare in the root zone, and that will tide you through the drought. When I took over my farm, I spent my whole dry season, I'm in a tropical climate, like lowland climate, like most of the area here in Kenya, and have a 3 months dry season, 9 months, 3 months wet season, 9 months dry season. I used to spend my whole dry season watering. I don't have to anymore because I can capture enough in the wet season for my crops to survive over the dry season because of the increased soil organic matter. Soil health and building up soil organic matter is crucial. And what I want to say, talk about what Dennis is talking about, perennial systems are the quickest and fastest and most efficient way to do it. If we transform our agriculture and start going over to perennial systems, we will also change our water capture and end drought.
Thank you. Million, please, and also give us a policy recommendation from all this.
Okay. To start with Hans' question, this is not Gambela, the region is divided into 3. And where most of the land grabbing has happened is called Anuak. And fortunately, the Indian, his name is Karazuri, he was given 300 hectares of land. Part of it was a national park, but he couldn't run it. And he was bankrupted. So the areas that he cleared have come up again. That's a very good story. And most of the people who were given land in Gambela have moved out. But this one has another challenge. It's called the Majang. People were practicing shifting agriculture, but the government, to lessen the problem in some parts of the country, brought people to this part of the country. And the area is very productive, especially for coffee. So people say that, oh, coffee is good, this is tree, so don't have to worry. But coffee has its own destructive characteristics. So they are clearing the forest and planting coffee, and since it's monocrop, the new piece of coffee, they have to use chemicals, pesticides, So yeah, that's why the degradation is happening, because the land is good and a lot of people are going there for agriculture.
Thank you, Million. Barbara?
Yeah, a policy said.
Yes.
In terms of policy recommendation, I would say two things. One is somebody did a study on how much of the DFID money goes into agroecology, into Africa. His name is Michel Pimbe. And his research was that, extending it, including any kind of redesigning of agriculture, only 5% of the funding goes to agroecology. Research, very little goes to agroecological research. So money is going. So governments have to put money into agriculture, and they have to increase the land area covered by agricultural practices. And the second is very much important, is this true cost accounting. We have to do a true cost accounting of industrial agricultural practices. Well, you can see an increase in production of a crop, but at what cost? Cost to health, cost to the soil, cost to water, and it's only after that we can say that this method of farming is good. So all governments should institute a true cost accounting system into agriculture. That's what I want.
Thank you. We'll have Barbara, then Carol, and saving the best for last, Dr. Mokaya will come in and give us something small, plus his policy recommendation. Barbara?
Yeah, I answer your question. Good question also, and I think there are, especially mountain mountain areas are pretty much neglected, because in terms, if you think of projects, you can't have a big outreach, so it's not so valuable, maybe. And also, mountain areas are very vulnerable, highly vulnerable, actually. It's often remote areas, high poverty, high vulnerable, very diverse climatic conditions, and very bad access to markets and so on. Many communities who live in those areas are already practicing organic by default, which we not like to say so much, but yes, they do it, but they need also knowledge and skills and better practices. And that's why we decided to work in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Carol?
Okay. The question, if I remember, was the challenges. Yes, and solutions. Okay. As a business, we do have challenges, and I'll just name the top three. The first one is that our farmers are not always, and when I say our farmers, organic farmers are not always consistent in the production of organic food. And we have found that this is mainly because they are farming based on the weather. So if there's rain, then they got, then they have, and then when there's not, then there's challenges. And this is not everyone, but that's what we're finding mainly with the small scale. So as a solution, we are proposing that, that farmers either gather together in a group, to create some sort of a fund and, and find a source of irrigation system. We've actually asked them, we were encouraging them to bring the young people, to their sons and daughters, to bridges where we actually meet them, and we actually now encourage them to be supplying these items now on behalf of their parents. So we have some kids, kids, young people who are able to deliver these vegetables on behalf of their parents to bridges. Our other challenge is the myth of organic food in the society. And this is now on the market side. So we're finding a lot of Kenyans, because this is the market we are, they're not very familiar as to what we mean when we say organic. So you have a lot of misconceptions. There's people who think organic is expensive, or it's for foreigners, or it's for sick people. it's just not very well understood. So
Thank you
yes,
very much.
Yes, yeah.
So I'll call on Dr. Mokaya to come here. So I'll call on Dr. Mokaya to come, give his brief remarks, give policy recommendations, and close for us. Yeah.
Homo habilis, we became Homo habilis after we became Homo we need to stand every so often. It's a little secret I want to share before I give my remarks. When you sit for between 4 to 6 hours every day, you're damaging your health to the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I found out I'm the only doctor in the department, so I'm going to give you so you can answer. Really, this is true. Did you hear what I said? I said if you sit from between 4 and 6 hours, the damage you're doing to your health is equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Oftentimes, when in workshops and seminars, we sit a lot. We are damaging our health by applying pressure on the lumbosacral region. So at least now, you know what makes you think? Because the doctor was in the pile. Okay. Having said that, I consider myself very humbly a big picture person. The big picture. All these great men and women I've shared. The session was about what? Use this one? Yeah, that's my nature. I like to move. It was part of the thing. I move around. Move around. Yeah, so, yeah. So the reason, well, I was thinking to be a keynote speaker. I humbly stepped down because I needed to just capture the part of the Mutu Mkono and make sure that we capture the essence of why we are here, why we're spending 3 days of quality time discussing these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next 70 to 100 years, we are
Mokaya to end us on such a high note. Let's give them a better round of applause. I'll call on Sylvia to take us to the next step, and I thank you very much, our panelists. We can take our seats. Thank you.
Can we appreciate that panel once again? And I just want to call for a special applause to Anne for moderating the biggest panel that we've had. A panel of 10 people is no joke, right? So thank you so much. We have a very limited time, and so I want to run 2-3 things very quickly. The first is somebody lost their phone. If you can find me after this, it's a Samsung. I'll return it to you. The second thing is that we have a farmer from Canada who came bearing some gifts, and I wish to ask him at this moment to come and give the gift to David. It would be improper for someone to bring you a gift and he goes back with it, right? So David and Harvey, please come.
Good afternoon. Greetings from Canada. It's really a privilege to attend your first annual conference on agroecology. I got interested some 4 years ago. I met a researcher in Calgary that they've been working on. They've tied in mineral deficiencies and mental illness. Depression, schizophrenia, all those nice, terrible things. And I really became interested. I found out in Canada that organics does not equal nutrition. And visiting with you folks here today, some of the people, it's the same in this country. The last 2 years, I organized a conference in Winnipeg on producing nutrient-dense food. Dr. Donald Huber has attended both those conferences and made presentations. So when he phoned me up, or I phoned him or something, and he said, there's a conference in Africa on what you and I talk about, and I have never been to Africa, never mind Kenya. So it was an opportunity to go on a trip and to see your country. And it's beautiful. And but I got thinking, what can we bring here to help out? The conferences, everybody's working, trying to put something together. And I've been working with a fellow who has practiced the Albrecht system for testing soil for over 20 years. As just said by this gentleman today, balance your soil, and you got many things solved. And so, what could we do? So, I decided what I do is I bring some books, and I've got 3 of these books presented to David here. And it tells the importance of each element. And so in Canada, I don't know how many producers are here today. Quite a few. Well, if you are, and what we do is producers in Canada, when you want to raise money for something to help with the conference, we have an auction. So I'm going to leave it up to David to do whatever he wants to auction it off. The other thing we've done is I put together what we call a snapshot soil test and recommendation done by our friend Dave Nelson with Petrogenesis, an Albrecht consultant, and it's presented to you as well, David, and along with the instructions of what to do. And remember, you're dealing with governments, so fill out the forms properly.
Thank you.
And I wish you very success in the rest of your conference, and indeed it's been a privilege to visit your country.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Harvey.
Good.
We shall certainly put this to good use.
Good.
And we'll give you feedback as well.
And if you want to get an acres book, go on Google www.acresusa, and you can get one.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay, good.
It's been a great pleasure for you to come and to give us this material.
Okay.
And we shall certainly put it to good use.
Very good.
How lovely.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so anybody else who comes bearing gifts, we're open for business. But thank you. We just, oh, there's another book. Okay. There's another book, David. At this rate, you might need a personal assistant. Okay.
I was just going to give it to him quietly and privately, but since since we're going to make this official, this is actually
Becoming a celebrity receiving
this is the book I wrote on pesticides in children, showing the science how no level is safe and why this considerable damage that pesticides do. And by the way, the publisher's the same publisher, Acres USA. We have the same publisher as Neil Kinsey, so go online, but also Amazon is the same.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank you.
David.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For your information, this is the second book that I'm receiving from Andrew. He also gave me one, The Myth of Pesticides.
The first one, yeah.
The first one. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You are going to make our resource centers become more informed. And such kind of valuable materials are very not only for us, but also for the farmers. So I can guarantee you the information that is in here, that is also in the book on soil fertility and fertilizer use, yours, it will certainly be very, very useful to us.
Actually,
Thank you.
one other point I just want to make, I actually used that's in that book on my farm, and when I did, my yield went through the roof.
Imagine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to call Sami Ndungu to come for a minute. A lot of people have been looking for me on the corridors to ask me about the farm visits. I just want to say the farm visits are organized by COAN in partnership with Profound. And I wanted him to just take 1 minute to give you an idea of what's going to happen in the field visit tomorrow so that you can make an informed choice. On Friday. Sorry, Friday, yes.
Friday, thank you. So we have organized 3 farm visits, and one is Sylvia's farm. I think Sylvia was here, and she explained about her farm, very nice small farm, where she's growing vegetables, doing basket delivery to some customers in Nairobi, and also she has a group of women she's working with. And as she explained, she's also doing a lot of water harvesting, so some very interesting stuff to see. And then after her farm, there will also be a visit to one of the very interesting herbal garden where that group will take lunch. So if you're interested, you can sign in. The other visit is to a farm or a group called Libua Group. Libua is a company. It used to be called Macadamia Farms. They have about 3,000 farmers, so they are doing internal control system and marketing their organic macadamia to Germany market using a very unique model where they get students from Germany to come and interact with the farmers, and then the students will go and market the macadamia through the schools. And then they also have a very good information technology system for running the internal control system. So people who will go there, they will have an experience on how they are doing it in their 3 model macadamia factories in Kirinyaga. Kirinyaga is near Mount Kenya Forest, so it's a bit cold. The third visit will be in Gilgil. Gilgil is a bit dry area. There will be a big organic farm, about 350 acres. And this farm used to be a flower farm, but the owner noted the negative effect of chemicals. I decided to convert it to organic farm. That is in 2012. And now he's planting vegetables, and also he has some livestock, and both dairy cows and dairy goats, and chicken, and also he does wheat and maize, mostly for his staff. The farm is a very nice staff in a very nice environment, and people who go there, they have an opportunity of eating a pure organic meal. And also see a bit of countryside, because that farm is about 2.5 hours from Nairobi. So we'll be closing the registration today, so make sure you go pass through the the registration desk, so that you can sign up. The information desk, so that you can sign up for the visit. And then you specify where you want to visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So you have 3 choices, 3 interesting choices to make. So please make your choice. Sorry, someone's calling me for a Skype call. They don't know I'm busy, right? Okay, so we want to do our final breakouts for the day, but I want to explain what is going to happen thereafter, because thereafter is the real deal. Our breakouts today will only be for 1 hour, because we want you back in the room by latest 6:15. The reason is because we are going to have the BVAT anniversary in 2 phases. The first phase is going to take place in this room. And this is going to be the controlled part. Then there's going to be the less controlled part, where we're going to have dancing and fun. And if you loved what you saw on the first day with the safari cats, there'll be much more to show at the Nyama Choma Ranch. And those of you who love Kenyan Nyama Choma, this is your chance to go crazy with it, okay? So the first part is going to be here. We should be in the room by 6:15. The second part will be, we have to be at the Nyama Choma Ranch by 7:45, because they're going to do a special show for us. So now, we don't want to miss the special show, neither do we want to miss the Nyama Choma, and we also don't want to miss to listen to BVAT as they tell us about their 10 years journey. So I want to really request you, as you go for your breakout session, can I ask the moderators, please be very strict on time. By 6:15, please release your people to come back here. Now, to make things easier, today we are serving tea in 2 sections. There's some tea for those who are going to be in these 2 rooms here. Your tea is going to be served on the corridor. Those who are going to be at Bougainville and Ivory, your tea is already there. So don't hang around here. I want you to hurry up, have your tea in 10 minutes, and be in your room starting the session. Today we have 4 breakout sessions. The first one on the impact of synthetic inputs. The main speaker is going to be Million Bilay, Dr. Million Bilay, the coordinator of AFSA. Million is already here, and you saw him speak earlier. The moderator for that session is Ms. Barbara Zilli. And, wow. Where is Gillian? I need the where. Can I have the program? Can I have a printed program, please? Yes, I've no, I want a printed one. I need that. I need that. I need that. Excuse me, Sylvia, give me your program. Sorry, just give me a minute. I'm using the wrong document. So, Session 9. Session 9 is going to be in Samburu, right? Session 10 is going to be in Savo, which is here. Samburu is there. So, and the keynote speaker there is Dr. Julius Mwine. The moderator is Professor Rhoda Birech. Session 11 is going to be in Ivory. Session 11 is going to be in Ivory. The moderator there is Samuel Ndungu, and the keynote speaker is Anne Majani. And then breakout 12 is going to be in Bougainville. The moderator there is Mr. Eustace Gashanja, and the main speaker is Mr. Matthias Wafula from the ministry. I saw him earlier, so we are all good to go. So please take, yes? Oh, did I say? Samburu. Session